Greetings and welcome to Illinois in Focus Weekend Edition, powered by the Center Square. I'm Greg Bishop, Illinois editor at Franklin News Foundation, publisher of the Center Square Newswire service. This week for Illinois in Focus, the Center Square reporter Jim Talamonte and I will discuss the blame Republicans and Democrats are shifting for the partial federal government shutdown, public safety and immigration enforcement in and around Chicago, and upcoming legislative activity. All of that and more when we return for more Illinois in Focus, powered by the Center Square.
Some people would call him a loser. He ran for state office. He was beaten. He started a business. He failed. He ran for Congress. He lost. He was nominated for vice president. He lost again. But he knew only those who never tried are the real losers. And Abraham Lincoln was no loser. Persistence. Pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at values.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. Early Wednesday morning, the federal government partially shut down, and elected officials in Washington, D.C. and the state of Illinois are pointing fingers as to who's to blame. The shutdown comes amid heightened tensions between the Trump administration and Illinois over increased federal immigration enforcement in a sanctuary state and the prospect of the military being used to keep the peace. Joining me to discuss this is the Center Square reporter Jim Talamonte. Jim, Democrats say it's Republicans who are to blame for the partial government shutdown, which is impacting federal employee pay, safety net programs like WIC, and more. Who are Republicans in the Trump administration saying is to blame for the lapse in spending?
Greg, Republicans are pointing to Senate Democrats. Vice President J.D. Vance joined a White House press briefing Wednesday morning, and he said this goes at Senate Democrats. They are, according to Vance, they've shut down the government. They stopped a Republican resolution to continue funding, a stopgap funding measure that would have kept everything open. According to Vance, the reason Senate Democrats did this is because Republicans won't give billions of dollars in health care funding to illegal aliens. That's according to J.D. Vance. Now, of course, various members of Congress or Democrats say that's not the case, but according to Vance, it is. So there are talks going on, closed door type stuff or private conversations, at least in some way or another, according to Vance. Though he said some Democrats are willing to negotiate in good faith, others no. So those he's just kind of leaving to the side. But, you know, this is kind of the typical thing. We've seen these shutdowns before. Each party blames the other. Whichever party does not have the president in office points the finger at the president. And, of course, the party in power points the other way at the minority blocking party, as they would say. So we've been through these before. Obviously, though, if it continues for a long period of time, it begins to affect a lot of people really in significant ways. So but again, to those who point to Washington gridlock and failing to, work on behalf of the people, I guess it's easy for the people to point the fingers at both sides.
And Governor J.D. Pritzker was asked about this, the shutdown in particular, and he blamed Republicans and even poked fun at President Donald Trump over a book that Trump wrote.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, since January, or even maybe since before that, since Donald Trump was reelected to his second term following the Biden administration in between, J.B. Pritzker just has gone out of his way every opportunity he has to criticize the president. At every event he does, he has set up events with the basic intent of criticizing the president. So that's been the playbook. And Democrats did this to a degree after Trump was elected the first time in 2016. And, I guess in a way you could say, and it paid off with the election of Joe Biden in 2020 with some help from the pandemic. But back to Pritzker, he took aim at the president. He again suggested that the president has something wrong with him. He mentioned the word dementia. That's at least the second time in the last 2 or 3 weeks that Pritzker has suggested that the current president, not talking about Biden here, we're talking about Trump, that he has some kind of dementia issues. But in addition, he brought up The Art of the Deal, Trump's book. Of course, Trump has often talked about himself as a deal maker, and he's making deals with other countries on trade. He has brokered peace deals and he's continuing to try to do that. But Pritzker said, well, if he's such a great deal maker, time to go to work, especially or essentially issuing a challenge to the president to settle this thing, to not leave it to members of Congress. So Pritzker issued the challenge, and we'll see what happens, or when it happens, or if it happens, in terms of getting the government operating again.
We're here recording this Thursday, October 2nd. It's only the second day of the government shutdown. How long this goes, that's a big overarching question. Could it be a couple of weeks, or could it stretch on even longer? Of course, they've got to get some kind of funding plan in place to fund some critical things like women, infant, children programs, simple salaries for members of the military, and a whole host of things. But Jim, I want to go back to kind of what you started with, where the Republicans put the blame. They said that Democrats want to fund illegal alien health care, with a whole host of other things, including reversing some of the so-called big beautiful bill provisions. But what's interesting is Democrats are denying that they want to fund non-citizen health care. Jim, in Illinois, we've spent $3 billion on just that. Taxpayers in Illinois have paid billions of dollars for illegal immigrant health care. We had the health benefits for immigrant seniors that's still in place for seniors 64 and over who are undocumented. They're getting taxpayer subsidies for health care. Just before the start of this fiscal year, we had the health benefits for immigrant adults program. But even the governor, recognizing that it was costing a lot more than they initially thought, they ended that program at the start of this year. So how can Democrats say that they don't want that when a state like Illinois, that's considered a Democrat state, is doing just that?
Yeah, and some Democrats were not happy with the governor for cutting off the immigrant adult funding program and only continuing with the program for seniors health care. I remember, I believe it was Graciela Guzman said she would not vote for any budget. Well, it turned out she did, but that didn't include the continuation of that funding of health care for non-citizen migrants, people who are undocumented or in the country illegally. So that part of the funding went out, but it's still quite a significant dollar amount when you look at the immigrant the funding, or the taxpayer funding of immigrant health care for seniors. So here in Illinois, it's certainly Illinois Democrats, I guess, would have a hard time making that argument. Perhaps in some other states where the state houses and the state legislatures aren't doing that, perhaps there's a better argument. But Don Tracy, who was a U.S. Senate candidate, former state GOP party chairman in Illinois, he called out in particular two people who he could eventually be in a general election against, or one of them he could be against, the U.S. Senate race, current U.S. Reps Raja Krishnamurthy and Robin Kelly, who part of the congressional delegation from Illinois, who voiced their support for Democrats blocking the continuing resolution. Again, they say not because of illegal immigrant health funding, but standing with Senate Democrats who blocked that resolution. It was in the Senate where this got blocked and where that blockage led to the government shutdown. But yeah, the political sides are, everyone's out throwing verbal darts at the opponents. Hopefully something's getting done behind closed doors.
Starting the show here, of course, leading with the partial government shutdown. That's definitely the news this week. But before that, Jim, things were already popping off here in Illinois pretty good. Whenever you had, over the weekend, the clashes between, protesters outside of the, federal ICE detention facility in Broadview, Illinois, pretty dramatic scenes there. All kinds of, fights and scuffles between protesters and police, federal officials on the streets of Broadview. And then Monday, Governor J.D. Pritzker came out and said that he got word that there's going to be 100 military troops expected in Chicago. Continued from there. At the end of this week, we're looking at now DHS announcing more than 800 illegal aliens arrested. We've got so much to tackle with this, Jim. Where do we even start?
Yeah, I have to say, I was at that ICE facility in Broadview, just over a week ago. I'm glad the day I was there, it was quiet. This was the day that the Republican gubernatorial candidate Ted Dabrowski had a press conference there. There were a handful of protesters. One of them was somewhat disruptive to the second half of Dabrowski's press conference, but no violence, no one was really being, other than this one individual, no one was obnoxious, and no one got in the way of, we didn't see a lot of activity coming in and out of the gates to the ICE facility, but there wasn't any issue there. However, in particular, the last couple of Fridays and also last Saturday, things did, as you said, Greg, got pretty rough and pretty nasty. And again, ICE is saying they're not getting, or I should say DHS saying ICE is not getting cooperation from local law enforcement in Broadview. And the Broadview, this is a suburb, fairly near west suburb of Chicago. The Broadview mayor has come out against ICE, the Trump administration, not only not cooperating, but even Broadview officials calling out the federal government for putting up a fence, which the fence, according to DHS, was necessary just to protect people inside, both workers and detainees. And then Broadview officials coming out saying, well, that fence is not according to code. That should not be there. That has to be taken down. And then police not responding when federal officials made calls to help to local police to kind of tamp down these protests, which got violent. And there were firearms recovered. There were fireworks.
People were charged with firearms offenses, federal firearms offenses, caught up against the gate, the fence that you talked about.
Right. And there were people blocking vehicles access. There were people trying to get in the face of the federal officers and agents. So this was certainly not peaceful protesting, though some Democrats said it was, but it certainly didn't appear that way. And so in the ICE officers, of course, had to resort to do what they could for self-protection. And there was one of the days I was there, one protester who didn't have a whole lot to say, but he pulled up the side of his shirt and pointed out bruises from pellet guns, what he said. Now, he said they got me. I assume he was talking about ICE. I don't know. But there were also tear gas canisters and things thrown by protesters, according to DHS officials. So a lot of stuff going on back and forth. And fortunately, there hasn't been at that facility. There haven't been, as far as you know, any kind of serious injuries. But boy, if things don't settle down, you almost feel like it's a ticking time bomb, that something's going to happen. And unfortunately, the rhetoric on both sides is not tamping down at all. If anything, it's just inflaming. And Governor Pritzker and others have shown no signs of offering any kind of olive branches.
Well, and even President Donald Trump not really seeming to offer up any olive branches. He says that Pritzker should call him, but then he calls him a loser, calls him stupid, and a variety of other different colorful words to describe Governor J.D. Pritzker. But Jim, obviously this is all about federal immigration law. We've been tracking this at thecentersquare.com. Encourage people to go and check out the articles and watch the clips of these news sources, words coming out of their mouths. But this is all about enforcing immigration laws that are on the books. I mean, DHS just put out a statement saying that so far for Operation Midway Blitz, which they announced a couple of weeks ago, increased immigration enforcement, they've made more than 800 arrests from this operation.
Yeah, and some of those now critics are saying that some of these people being arrested aren't the violent criminal offenders that were supposedly being targeted. We don't have all of the names, all of the breakdowns. We do have names and photos of what the Department of Homeland Security calls the worst of the worst. And so just Wednesday, in the most recent statement that we've seen, DHS posted some of the names and photos from at least 7 different countries. I mean, including Austria, Poland, at least 2 or 3 Central American countries, Venezuela, Mexico. There may have been one Asian country. There certainly was an Asian country or 2 in the previous round of photos published by DHS. But some of the crimes that some of these individuals have been convicted of, not charged with, but convicted of, include aggravated criminal sexual assault, aggravated criminal sexual abuse, armed carjacking, burglary, concealing homicidal death, domestic violence, DUI, statutory rape. Others are facing charges for various things, some, like larceny, others drug charges, a fair amount of those things. One, according to DHS, confirmed Tren de Aragua gang member. There was a reported raid early morning one day this week where estimates ranging from 30 to over 40 people detained. This was a building numerous observers say was known to be housing Venezuelan migrants, and there was activity there that other residents were concerned about, and that quite a number of people were brought into custody. Actually, I asked the governor this week about Tren de Aragua. Would you consider some kind of deal with the president? We talked about deal making where you just Tren de Aragua, or just these really violent offenders working with the federal government. And he kind of said, well, we're working with them on violent, but he wouldn't specifically address Tren de Aragua or immigration officials, immigration agents detaining these individuals. So, again, part of the DHS position and the Trump administration position is, well, these local governments are refusing to enforce detainers. They're releasing these people without letting us know. We're having to go find them. And this is what's resulting in challenging situations that can become dangerous for immigration officers, also for the people who are being detained, or people who are facing warrants, or who are here, whether they be illegally or, heaven forbid someone gets mistaken for someone who's here illegally. So it's just according to DHS and the Trump administration, that situation of non-cooperation is just making it more dangerous for everyone.
Well, and it's got, the backing of Republicans at the State House to reverse the Trust Act, which is the law that former Governor Bruce Rauner signed. And then you have another one, a Way Forward Act, that really enhanced it even further. And we're talking about those sanctuary state policies, the policies of prohibiting local and state law enforcement from cooperating with federal immigration officials when they are executing civil immigration detainers. Now, the criminal immigration detainers, they'll cooperate with, but that all seems to be lost in this ongoing debate where, Jim, you and I have been digesting this stuff for weeks, if not months now. When the politics gets involved, it seems that everybody's just drawing that line in the sand and not willing to cooperate. So, legislators at the State House have a lot to tackle, obviously. Will they take up State Representative C.D. Davidsmeyer bill to reverse the Trust Act? Will they take up another bill a Republican has to touch on exactly what we saw in Broadview? Jeff Kiker, a Republican from Sycamore, he has a House bill that would require 14-foot distance between police conducting official activities and anybody else, like a protester. So, these types of things are starting to surface in this overall conversation, but we'll obviously be tracking it close at thecentersquare.com. Jim, a lot more to come on all of that, obviously. Who knows what happens over the weekend? We'll be watching the streets to see if there's more protests and if they get violent, if that triggers the military coming in to protect federal personnel and property, as was done in LA. So we'll be watching that closely at thecentersquare.com. Jim, I can't believe it, but October 2nd when we're recording this, and just a handful of days, really, it'll be here before we know it, we're going to be in fall veto session. And the big ticket item is the transit cliff. We've kind of gotten some mixed messages the past week or so about just how severe the fiscal cliff is and just when that bottom is going to drop out. What's the latest? What do you expect to happen during fall veto session?
Well, it's going to be interesting because all along we felt that transit is indeed the top ticket item. It may still be. I think certainly for some lawmakers it is, but others are really concerned about energy, and energy legislation is also going to be a really big thing, I think. Whether anything gets done, I don't know, because there's so much to address on energy. But there was a very interesting transit panel presented by the Lincoln Forum and the Union League Club last week, and State Senator Seth Lewis said, with new revenues and regional transit authority money transfers, this fiscal cliff that we all thought, boy, end of 2025, that's it. 2026, if something doesn't get done, that's it. We're going to have these drastic cuts. We always hear this doomsday cuts, as they say, especially for the CTA in Chicago. But Lewis said, well, PACE, the suburban bus transit authority, would not be implementing any fiscal cliff until 2027. Even the CTA with new leadership seems to be operating a little bit more efficiently. He says, we have time. And almost sounding like Speaker Welch last summer when he said we don't need an extra session during the summer to deal with this. We have time. We have till the end of the year. Well, Seth Lewis says we have more time than that. We don't really have to get into funding until spring session 2026. It would be nice to get into governing and making the governing bodies more efficient. That's what we really need to do. On the other side of the aisle, State Senator Ram Vilivalam, who's been one of the leading drivers of transit legislation, pushed the funding legislation that included that pizza tax, the retail delivery $1.50 tax, and the real estate transfer tax and environmental fees. He still really wants to get this done here in the fall veto session, and says that this just needs to be done, and he is determined to get it done. And so will he have enough support, though, to get some kind of modified funding package through? That remains a good question, because it seems as though that there are some different proposals out there. We've talked about them here, but whether everyone can get together and get it through, there's still time. This can extend well into October, but it doesn't seem like that fiscal deadline is quite as firm as everyone previously had us believing.
We'll be watching that closely, and also what happens at veto session. I was going to take some time to talk about the agreed bill process, Jim, but that might be a little too in the weeds for the little time we've got left. And with that little time, I do think that we need to talk about the 2026 elections coming up. And at least one issue has really surfaced for Republicans looking to take on Governor J.D. Pritzker in November of 2026, and that's education.
There's no question. And this is one issue that a lot of analysts have thought education is an area where Republicans really could gain some ground. In particular, we saw the massive bipartisan opposition to the Homeschool Act during the spring session. School choice is something that has some appeal to people on the Republican side of the aisle, but some appeal. A lot of prominent Democrats have expressed the willingness to support school choice, at least in underprivileged areas, poor economic areas. So, and this is an area where Republican candidate Ted Dabrowski has a lot of expertise over the years. He has visited different school districts that are doing well. He says Governor Pritzker should be prioritizing literacy over diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And he has talked about different school districts and what they're doing and how we really need to focus on proficiency, literacy, and those kinds of things. Meanwhile, Vance, Illinois, it came out with new information this week showing kind of what we've seen all along. Illinois is stagnant with proficiency. Most students are not able to read at grade level. In some cases, only a third or fewer, depending on the grade, are able to have math and reading proficiency at grade level. These are awful numbers for our education system that we spend so much money on. Most students are not college ready when they come out of high school. Only 30%. That's down from 38% before the COVID-19 pandemic. So a lot of the numbers indicate Illinois is not moving in the right direction, and some change is needed on that in the area of education policies.
That'll just be one of the many issues that's come up during the 2026 gubernatorial election, and we'll be covering that and so much more at thecentersquare.com. Jim, thank you so much for joining us today, and listeners can keep up with these stories and more at thecentersquare.com.